Hello.
Hello.
And welcome to Cinema Spotlight.
Your latest roundup of all the films and re-releases hitting cinemas this week.
Every episode, we are celebrating a different independent London cinema, giving you the lowdown on the fantastic food, facilities, and overall experience.
This week, we'll be defying gravity with the feature film adaptation of Wicked.
And we'll be wandering back along the yellow brick road to revisit the 1939 original.
And beware of the Wheelers with the 80s classic children's horror movie Return to Oz.
Plus, Oz may be great and powerful, but is Sam Raimi's film of the same name? We'll see.
And we'll be sitting down with Jack O'Donnell as he talks about his amazing short film, The Woman in Blue.
This week we went to the fantastic Genesis Cinema in Whitechapel to watch the only cinematic release of the week, which is of course Wicked. Now, I love the Genesis Cinema. I go there all the time, and I'd love to tell you a little bit more about it. Between Whitechapel Station and Stepney Green, you'll find Genesis Cinema on Mile End Road. Built in 1848, it holds a place in English history, notably being where icons of cinema had their early days in theatre, including Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin.
Nowadays, it's a 5-screen cinema showing the latest blockbusters, cult classics, and several film festival screenings, while supporting local artists with regular art exhibits that take place in the gallery and providing an enjoyable and valuable cinematic and artistic experience for the local community.
With delightfully comfy sofas, you can lean back and relax whilst getting lost in a new film. It boasts the massive Screen 1 with 566 seats in its main auditorium, making every film experience feel absolutely epic.
We grabbed some popcorn and a quick cocktail and took our seats to settle in for Wicked. This week, we're beginning with Wicked, of course, what else? Which tells the story of Elphaba, a strange and peculiar student who travels to Shiz University in Oz to begin her studies, starring Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, based on the wickedly successful musical of the same name. Now, Reuben, we went to see this together.
We did.
And I think I could sense your admiration for the film, as you may have been able to sense mine, but please tell me more about it.
Yes, was it the fact that I gave it a round of applause at the end that gave it away?
I joined in, so it's absolutely fine.
I really, really enjoyed this film. I felt like I was at the theatre. You know, it gave me all of those good endorphins that you get when you watch a fantastic musical. I'm, really intrigued about this film. It's obviously part one of two. They're adapting the stage musical, which is 2.5 hours in length, into what will be a 5-hour-long film, two-parter. But honestly, the time flew by, and I just spent the whole time honestly beaming at the screen. I laughed, I cried. I marveled at the cinematic wizardry, pun intended, on display. I thought it was fantastic. And the key to it is the two most charismatic people on the planet, as you mentioned, Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba and Ariana Grande as Glinda, who of course we're familiar with from The Wizard of Oz. I thought that this was a really good prequel, and I had seen the stage play, but I thought it translated fantastically to the screen. There's something about the world of Oz that is inherently cinematic, obviously, because that's the way that we've kind of really enjoyed it for the last, 80 years since the original came out. And I was really, really sort of sucked into this world of romance and magic and just amazing images. Like the landscapes in this film are sensational. So I had a fantastic time.
This film was spectacular.
Spectacular.
And I went in with sort of gauged. I was coming with a sort of soft, wanting it to be brilliant.
Yeah.
My experience of Wicked, I haven't seen the stage show because my family always went without me. If you're watching, I am judging you for that. But I have been so aware of this musical. My sister is a super ultra mega fan. And so I'd hear the score through my sister's bedroom wall all the time. So I know the music. I know the lyrics. I know it so well. It's ingrained in, I think, my family's DNA now, just by how much she appreciated it. And I went in being like, well, the trailers looked promising. And of course, and I wasn't skeptical about any of the performers that they'd hired to be in the film. I thought, well, these are all great choices. You know, Cynthia Erivo, I think she won awards for The Color Purple on stage. Ariana Grande obviously began in theatre and then became the super ultra mega star that she did. And you're right, those performances are stellar.
Yeah.
Interstellar.
Interstellar.
I couldn't take my eyes off either of them when
Yeah.
they were both on screen. They were both just electric on
Yeah.
screen, as were everyone else. That is my main point about the film. The film really is held up and supported by these fabulous performances. Not only do you have charisma, chemistry, but you also have people who can sing. And they could sing the house down.
Yeah.
Ariana Grande can not only be a pop star, but she has this beautiful operatic voice. And when Cynthia Erivo opens her mouth to sing The Wizard and I, that's when I locked into the movie.
Yes.
It got me. It got me. And I was so engaged. Oh, I loved it. And Jonathan Bailey, gosh, red under the collar.
I genuinely, the great thing about his performance is everyone in the film fancies the pants off him, and in every shot there are just people sort of almost swooning. It's really, really brilliantly cast. I think they've done a tremendous job with that. I think in awards season we're going to see some appearances from the Wicked cast. I sort of think Ariana Grande is definitely getting a good shot at Best Supporting Actress. I just thought Ariana Grande in particular was brilliant. I actually watched a lot of Victorious. I think she's phenomenal in that show.
I'm an iCarly person, I must
Okay.
say myself.
But she is really remarkable in this. And in many ways, I think she gets more of a fun role than Cynthia Erivo. Almost a bit like with Barbie last year, you sense that Ariana Grande is having a ridiculous amount of fun with the role. And when she gets to do scenes like Popular, I just thought, like, really inventively done. The screen is just sort of exploding with pink light, and there's sort of drapery flowing across the camera lens. It's just really, really slickly done. And she's able to lean into that kind of Regina George, Mean Girls energy that she does so well. And I also thought that Jeff Goldblum in there as the wizard, like, he's such a mercurial performer generally, it just suited him down to the ground. And I think, as we'll talk about later, I think the wizard is a really difficult character to get right. And to me, he had exactly the right kind of shades of darkness and light and whimsy that you want from actually, quite a mysterious, enigmatic character. I'd like to talk about the direction as well, because you'll be able to speak much more about this because you are a musical theatre person and music is your lifeblood. But I think that what he does in this film is really interesting because it isn't staged like a play, right? It's very, very cinematically shot. But I also think that he gives you, at times, enough of a kind of a wide view of things. You can appreciate the choreography. You can appreciate, the incredibly intricate sort of detailing and dance performances that are going on. It makes the world feel really well-rounded, and you buy into the illusion of the musical, which I think when you've got something that balances dialogue scenes and singing scenes, sometimes can be a little bit difficult, the switch between those. I thought it was really an impressive feat of direction.
Now, yes, I thought that was something that I was happy when watching through the film, that got even better the way they did the musical numbers.
I would agree, actually, that the opening section, No One Mourns the Wicked, I thought was actually not particularly...
I would go to say it's a weak opening.
I agree.
And that comes into another point, which I may discuss a little bit more later, is that the actual mixing of the music throughout the film is a bit spotty. For the lead solo songs, it's really well done.
Yeah.
But for the opening, it's really poor, in my opinion. Like, those blasting fanfare is undermixed.
I agree.
And it's got this wonderful opening, sweeping, cinematic shot of flying monkeys flying through the windows.
It's a oneer, I think,
isn't
it?
It's a brilliant shot, but it takes away from Stephen Schwartz's brilliant overture. And the singing is kind of undermixed, and it's sort of, in the show and on the original album, it's a big chorus number, but it's now been given even more individual parts, so it just feels a bit thin. And then it's also not filmed very kinetically. However, as you said, throughout the film, it gets to this beautiful kineticism, this beautiful chopping and great editing around these musical numbers. What is this feeling or loathing, whatever it's you want to call it? That is edited really well.
I love
split
that
screens, the way it's edited so snappily, but brilliant. And then dancing through life sequence, the whole extended sequence, including the dialogue, including all the emotional beats. And they've taken a little bit of the music out, but not all of it. And that's why I really appreciate the two parts, because does enable you to enjoy and watch the entire musical score in its full, wicked, and wonderful glory. And I really do appreciate the direction because the performances are so strong.
Yes.
And that comes down to not only picking the right people, but also the right way that this could go. And there's good bits of comedy that don't feel laboured. They're
I agree.
dotted in there. And you could say maybe a bit gratuitous in places with like Bowen Yang's character, but I had no problem with it.
Oh, I totally
No
agree.
problem. I like the little side characters.
I loved meeting these characters, and I was so thoroughly charmed. And that's properly magic. We've talked recently about some films that we felt were lacking a bit of spark. My goodness, this film has spark in shed loads.
Oh, in droves.
It is so much fun. If I have one major bugbear, I think that the visual stylings of it are sometimes a little flat.
Same.
It's
Exactly
a
the
little
same.
drab at times. And I mentioned the colours, the pink in the popular sequence. That really stood out to me because it is a rare moment when the screen is really saturated. Because at other points, it just feels like they've dialed it down a little bit. It's almost like it's almost in log, you know?
Yeah, I
It's a
thought the
little bit
color grade
grim.
was poor.
Yeah.
Like genuinely, and that's what going through all these movies, and there's one exception, but everything else has this vibrant oversaturation. But that's what you expect.
Yes.
Because we're going to talk about the 1939 film. But what is the most iconic shot from that film?
Yeah.
It's the transition from sepia into marvelous Technicolor.
Yeah.
And this film, you watch it and you're like, okay, I think the staging's brilliant. I think the choreography is spectacular.
Yes.
It's got that Greatest Showman stomping the ground kind of
It does.
typical dancing.
Yes.
That seems to be the fashion with musical film at the moment. But yes, the color grade is, in my opinion, a bit pitiful.
No, I
because
agree.
whether they kind of push it to, in the second one, to sort of be a bit darker, a bit more intense with the more intense music and the more intense story that it follows through. I don't know, but it is a little drab, as you said. I do agree wholeheartedly. I thought that little dance sequence they do in complete silence between Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande is brilliant.
I
because
love that.
It's
I
non-verbal.
cried in that scene because it was so tender.
It's perfect filmmaking because you're like, I understand with the performances, with the way they're doing it, exactly what happens. And then also there's a really great moment between Jonathan Bailey and Cynthia Erivo's character later in the film. And I think I would give it the chance to just use some more of those moments. You've got this excellent cast and you've got these really deep emotions of this idea of betrayal, this idea of character assassination, this idea of abuse and all these deep, dark themes and motifs that run through the entire Wizard of Oz film franchise.
Absolutely.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I'm fully in, and I'll go, and I'm sure there'll be back-to-back screenings of part one. If I go in after watching part one, which does absolutely end with a brilliant rendition of Defying Gravity, which is action-packed, and the action's great, and the two of them are selling it so well, and I'm just like, well, I'll put up with a slightly bleaker second half, I don't really mind because this one was so good. It captured all those moments, and now I want to see how it ends. So I'm definitely going to see it no matter what.
I completely agree, and I'm glad that we're kind of ending on Defying Gravity because I just thought that sequence was brilliantly staged. The way that they really extend it. Actually, there's a lot of action happening in between parts of the song, but it comes together into this sort of just rapturously. All overwhelming sequence where obviously, I mean, we know what happens. Elphaba flies, and it was properly magnificent cinema, blockbuster cinema, and you wanted to cheer because it was so just rapturous. I can't wait to watch it again.
Oh, absolutely.
And have that experience.
I think you'll agree with me that I think we've both been changed for the better.
I love that. And now we move on to discuss, of course, the 1939 The Wizard of Oz, one of the, most influential, most acclaimed films of all time. I know it's one of your personal favourites, and I think it's completely fine. Let's dig into it. Tell me why it is the greatest film ever made.
Now, this film is... It's so hard to talk about because what can be said about it that hasn't already been said? Yeah. It's very old, and as you said, it is referenced in everything from David Lynch, The Simpsons, to Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead. It's all-encompassing. It's universal. I'm surprised if aliens couldn't recognize this film because of how important it is. To me, this film is the cinematic equivalent of hot soup, a grilled cheese sandwich, and a warm hug. I love this film. And I mean love, not like, oh, I enjoy it. I love it. I love it. I watched it again the other day, and I watch it frequently. If I'm feeling very sad, I will stick it on, and I will be absolutely swept up in the charm and the beauty and just the perfection, the absolute perfection of it. And I believe it is perfect. And I will always come out with a smile. It really has elevated my mood from the bottom of the bottom to somewhere over the rainbow.
Oh!
And this film also has a very special heart. It connects me to my family. My sister was played Dorothy in a production of it that we did at school, and just to see how close that made us as a brother and sister, and used to watch it on TV, and I think I used to watch it with my gran. And okay, it has that ability, but I can still enjoy it now as a 26-year-old man as I enjoyed it as a 6-year-old boy. I think there is just so much good in this film, and I do believe it deserves its place on the pedestal of cinema. And now I could talk more about it, and I want to discuss the music, I want to discuss everything, but first, I want to know, Reuben, why you have such a wrong opinion about this film.
Well, this is the thing. I know that I'm wrong. I know that I'm objectively wrong, and I know that this is, as I said, widely considered to be, one of the greatest films ever made. I find it completely emotionally, it's just a nothing. It doesn't move me. I don't particularly think it's funny. I certainly don't think it's emotional. I think that the arc of Dorothy, I think the arc of all of the characters is fundamentally just that she gets to go home. She gets to go back to her sad black and white existence.
Sepia.
She doesn't. Yes, she gets to go back to her dull sepia existence. In the second Oz film, at one point a character refers to it as humdrum, and I think it's humdrum. The
whole film is humdrum.
No, her life before she goes to Oz is humdrum, and then she returns to it, and she's not sure if it's real. I just don't think that she has any character arc. What's the arc? There isn't one.
What's the arc?
Yeah, she just realizes that actually she shouldn't run away from home.
No, it's about learning that love is in the places that you think that you have to escape from. No, what's the arc? This story is about learning to accept who you are.
Okay,
a person.
It's about a bunch of people getting conned by the wizard.
Yes, they get conned, but
and the wizard faces no consequences.
But no, now this is the thing, that everything is in you all along. That is the through line. That is the understood, universal message of this film. If she wanted to go home, she always had the ability, but she had to know why she wanted to return, why she wanted to feel secure in herself. It's not just about going home. Home is this idea of who are you, Dorothy Gale? Who are you?
But I don't think we care about her home. We don't care. We don't care about her aunt. We don't care about her uncle. We only see her aunt sadly crying in a crystal ball, or reported to be being sad by a con man. We actually get no indication that they actually care about her. So I'm not invested in her going home. I want her to stay in Oz at the end of the film. The tragedy is that she grows as a character across the film. She becomes this strong, brave, independent girl. And then at the end of the film, she gets gaslit by a con man, and she goes back to her sad, drab little life.
No, see,
that is the story of the Wizard of Oz.
That is some warped. Warped. I wanted to say a naughty word then, but I can't. No.
But can I just say, listen, the fact is that it is still a very, very good film. I don't hate it. It's a very, very technically astonishing film. I watch it and I marvel at the visuals. I marvel at the effects. And to get a little bit nerdy about it, I think that it's a really fascinating example of kind of the early sort of fantasy technicolor genre, which has been massively influential, and it harks back to, it's what the film historian Tom Gunning talks about as the cinema of attractions, right? Which is when you have very, very early experimental cinema, right at the end of the 19th century and the start of the 20th century, where the appeal of film is that you can literally put magic on screen through the edit, right? The magic of the cut is something that films become obsessed with. And you actually see so much of that in The Wizard of Oz. It's a film about celebrating what you can do with the moving image. And I love that, and I love the craftsmanship of it. But I think that as a story, the characters are paper thin, the plot is abjectly depressing, and overall it is held together by the spectacle of the fantasy world, which is absolutely amazing.
Now, what you say is paper thin, I think is more accessible.
Okay.
Now, this movie has characters who have very, you can understand what they want, who they are, very easily. Each of the three amigos, I guess you could call them, the three tagalongs, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion, they have very simple wants. They emphasize it, each in the same song.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful songs.
It's not a very good song.
Oh, don't be ridiculous.
I don't think the music in this film is very good.
Oh.
Yeah, Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, not a banger.
No, okay. Now, I'm just going to, before I yell at my...
Munchkins, I don't like any of their
Okay,
songs.
the Munchkins are incredibly annoying.
Yeah.
But before I yell at my co-host again, I'm just going to talk about, now you can talk about the music as a whole, and I do believe that the music is spectacular. I think it's the best mixed music still to this day of all the movies we're talking about today. I also still think it's the best looking film of all four.
I
all
do
four.
agree.
And this
very
is from
much.
1939. It's the best looking film. I also think that you are very incorrect about the music. I think even if you hated every other song in the film, the fact that Somewhere Over the Rainbow exists in this film, and I think a perfect piece, I've said that word a couple of times, but it is a magical level of songwriting.
It's wonderful. I exempt Somewhere Over the Rainbow from my criticism because it's a wonderful, wonderful song, and it's a fantastic scene.
And we haven't talked about it, but the reason that the song works so well, and the reason a lot of the music is the vocal.
Because she's so miserable.
Oh my God. It's the vocal performance of Judy Garland. And I adore her performance, as does every other person on the planet.
She's not the best, Dorothy.
Ridiculous. No, she is absolutely the best, Dorothy. She encapsulates what it is. You look at her and she's like a flower. Like absolutely dainty and soft and gentle, but lost, and she has to find herself. It's all about trying to find herself. You can say it's paper thin, but more I see it is it's more as a better reflection. Why the world over loves this film is because anybody on this planet could watch that film and see themselves in Dorothy, see themselves in the Scarecrow, see themselves in the Tin Man, the Lion, see all this, even in the Wicked Witch. That's why Wicked exists, for God's sake. And it's all about they can really fill themselves into that role and understand the plight they're going through. Everyone's felt stupid. Everyone's felt like their heart doesn't work. Everyone's felt cowardly. Everyone's felt lost and without a home at times. And I think the reason is those people, that's not paper thin. That's just so that we can latch on to these magical, magnificent characters. And Judy Garland is the best Dorothy because of not only the sweetness of the performance, but the singing alone could elevate her performance above anything. And yes, she's a fabulous singer. I'd rank her higher than anyone else in any of these films that we've seen who are a singer, even Ariana Grande, because that voice, it's etched in time. When she sings those notes, it's like my soul reverberates with positivity and just a level of sheer enjoyment and again, I've used the word a lot and I keep repeating myself in these reviews. Absolutely. There we are. That's one of them. But magic, it is magic. It floats, and that's an octave leap. The very first, the somewhere is, and that's a hard thing to do so neatly and so majestically. And that scene is beautiful. And you say there's not enough in telling in the beginning of, you have to see it through her eyes. She feels dejected and alone. And we have to be separate from the family. But then she understands, I want to get back home. She says it very clearly. I was there in this beautiful, magical world, and all I could think about was going home to my family. And is that not a message that you can really understand?
Here's the thing. You make a really, really good point. I actually think you've made a fantastic point about the archetypes of those, what I would consider very shallow characters. You make a very, very compelling point that the reason that they are, thinly sketched is because actually they're sort of surrogates for us, and it makes them people that we can invest in. I just can't relate to what you're saying. I wish that when I sat down and watched The Wizard of Oz, I loved it, and I was moved, and I laughed, and I was filled with joy. But I wasn't. I felt very, very little, other than, wow, technically, this is a masterclass. And actually, I just want to talk about the technical aspects of it, because I don't want to come off as a hater. I do think that it is a good film. I just don't have the emotional connection that you do, and I do stand by that. I think the messaging of the film is very muddled, because okay, sure, she has the realization that home is where she belongs, and home is this place that she needs to get back to, and the land of Oz, as magical as it is, can't compete with the magic of her home. But we don't see any of that magic, so I can't relate to it, and I don't believe it emotionally. I do not believe in her arc, but the stylings of the story are amazing. I am in love with the painted backdrops. I am so obsessed with the richness of the Technicolor film stock and the processing, and of course, the way that those films were designed was specifically with Technicolor in mind, and so all of the colors are so unbelievably optimized. It sweeps you up into this fantasy world, which is simultaneously completely real and completely believable. But also it has this artificiality that makes it other and makes it truly otherworldly. And I was particularly astonished by, those kind of big wide shots that we get of the Wicked Witch's castle. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I assume a lot of it was done with miniatures, and they're just brilliant. So, technically, I really think it's a stunning piece of work, but emotionally, it does nothing for me.
No, I agree that the artifice, I think, makes this film feel more like Oz than any of the other films. Yeah. And I think that's what each of them, and we'll get into it, lacks compared to this film, is that it does look like it's built on a stage, but that makes it completely otherworldly.
Yeah.
I genuinely adore that you can see that they're matte paintings, but brilliant matte paintings.
And how did they do some of the special effects? I'm watching it going, wow, it was 1939. This would have absolutely blown everyone's mind.
Oh, I can see why it has that place in history. Everything looks so, like, the Emerald of Emerald City is the best green.
It is.
And the poppies are just a vibrant red, and it feels like the fields go on forever, but obviously it's a very small soundstage.
Yeah.
Sad to know, fun fact, that the snow is actually asbestos.
I did hear that.
But I mean, it does look realistic.
It does, and the costuming, of the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and the Lion, like, it's really, really brilliant. And it walks that line between being, deliberately theatrical. At no point are we meant to think, gosh, that looks photorealistic, which is, I think, kind of a problem that other films in this franchise, in this series, are sort of committed. They want it to look a bit more real. And I love how this embraces its theatricality. And again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about, the idea of audiences being there to sort of marvel at the spectacle of cinema and the magic that you can achieve with special effects. That extends to not just, cinematic special effects, but also practical special effects. And I love how we're just constantly, there's always fire exploding, there's always smoke, the Wicked Witch is always, appearing in bursts of, red mist. It's really, really exciting to see, a kind of fusion of that theatrical sensibility and also cinema. And the placement of the camera and the movement of the camera, I think, is really, really smart, because it allows you to simultaneously appreciate all of those things, in a kind of theatrical perspective, but also you're completely engaged with the story and with the narrative. I think that's a really clever balance.
Now, something we didn't mention that we might want to pick up on because of the nature of this review is the Wicked Witch herself,
who I think is a cackling caricature.
Well, but also you have to look at the context of, like, this is, you think about witch on film, and yes, there's been deconstructions and reconstructions and reinterpretations, as Wicked is, as is Oz the Great and Powerful, as is most other things about witches these days. Yeah. But you have to start somewhere. And Margaret Hamilton is the witch.
Yeah, she's so iconic.
You need to have that performance because none of the other ones would exist without it. You need that. And Frank Morgan's very good as this con man. He's the most charming of the wizards I think we've seen. But also, I do think that the wizard is something that I think we can discuss later in this review. That's a really interesting point to make because he is a con man. But I think even though in this film they don't quite realize it as the negative thing that it is, I still think the emotional arc is followed through by them alone and by their camaraderie and friendship. And now, you're going, all the hate mail, please send to Reuben directly.
I would love to get some hate mail.
But yes, I appreciate your points.
And I appreciate your points. And I wish so much that I had the same experience as you and that I loved it. Because I don't want to be a Wizard of Oz, denier. But I can't lie. It does very little for me.
See, I'll be following along on the yellow brick road, and you'll be more ding dong, the witch is dead. Yeah.
Not a banger.
Now for something quite special. We sat down with filmmaker Jack O'Donnell as he talked about his marvelous short film, The Woman in Blue, a really brave and unique depiction of degenerative illness in older people based in New Zealand. I really am excited for you guys to listen to this interview as it was so in-depth and really quite eye-opening. And check it out now.
So the story of the film is about an ex-policewoman who relives her memories from a dementia ward.
How are we today?
I want to go home.
Hey, you're with us now. We're looking after you.
I want to get out of this place.
You're all right.
She's seen in her head these visions, these imprints from her past life, and we wanted to really show that through colour and light. One of the beautiful things about making a film like this, where it's not necessarily real, is that we were able to put little imprints from the real world into the design of it. The look, the design was very deliberate, and the fact that we never go outside as well is another reflection on the fact that when you're in a dementia ward, it's kind of closed off. The idea came from my grandmother, who was in the last year of her life in a dementia ward. What I noticed is that she would never consider or acknowledge that there was anything wrong with her. That's something I noticed a lot with people I worked with dementia, and I really wanted to capture that on screen.
And if you want to check out The Woman in Blue, the link is in our description, and the full interview will be out later on our YouTube channel.
And now we turn to the 1980s film Return to Oz, which sees Dorothy return to the Emerald City, but everything is not as it once was. Instead of a fantastic, great and powerful wizard, we've got empty streets and the mysterious and sinister Wheelers. Now, Jake, I know that you absolutely love this film, and I'd love to hear, your in-depth thoughts about it, because I know you've watched it many, many times.
Many times. This film sits in that similar roster of 80s films that I just gravitated towards as a kid. Maybe because I was raised by a slightly eccentric family who I love and adore. Shout out to the Duftons. But really, my favorite film of all time, which isn't a secret, is Jim Henson's Labyrinth.
Okay.
And everything that comes around it. I loved Dark Crystal. All these films, they just sang to me. Return to Oz was such a creepy one under the surface, but Return to Oz is so unique. It is grey.
It's weird.
It's
the word I would
bizarre.
use is weird. It's a sort of carnival of grotesqueries at times.
I love that the defining imagery of the classic 39 film is this beautiful yellow brick road, but the first thing we see is in ruin. An absolute ruin. It almost feels like the YA novelization of the sequel of Wizard of Oz, as what would be done like a proto Hunger Games. Our sequel is thrown back into this bleakness, and you do have really terrifying sequences. The Wheelers. I feel that they were so the way they sound, the way they move. It's inhuman, even though they are portrayed by human beings.
Weird, aren't they? They're
Really
uncanny,
intense creatures. However, on that note, they are effectively scary, as is Mombi, with her removal of heads is,
Yeah.
people remember that scene of the head screaming whilst Dorothy runs out this beautiful palace, but screaming severed heads is quite a dramatic thing for a children's film to have. And this is Disney's first Wizard of Oz. Disney made this film.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the 80s, you know, around the time of Black Cauldron and all these sort of darker stories that people are telling. But I just find myself, I love the creature design. TikTok is a marvelous creature.
Totally.
Jack Pumpkinhead, you know, he's kind of awkward and creepy in the way he's presented, and also his design as this sort of stick-thin, easy-to-break creature. And even watching it now, I was like, could I make, if I ever had kids, to let them watch this? And I was like, absolutely, because I'll raise them on these crazy films as well. But yeah, I always come back to it. I really enjoy the opening of this film as well.
Right. So this is what I remember watching as a 5-year-old. Is I think I got about 20 minutes into this film when I was very, very young. And as I was watching this, I was suddenly having like sort of memories that I thought had disappeared from my mind, flooding back. So, you know, we basically find Dorothy being sent to an insane asylum in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of, you know, thunder and lightning, where she's going to have this incredibly frightening electroshock therapy. And it is played entirely as a really frightening horror film. It is fully a horror film for the first 20 minutes, because then she escapes from the asylum, she goes, you know, it falls into a river, and she wakes up in the land of Oz, but it's not wonderful. The yellow brick road is shattered, and you are introduced, you know, initially via just terrifying noises, this sort of strange, you know, squeaks and mechanical whining, to the Wheelers, who are these brilliantly designed, you know, sort of hunched over, four-legged, half man, half machine hybrid. They're absolutely terrifying. And I just remember getting to that point and immediately switching off and being haunted for days by just the visions, and they lived in my head. And I just think that's the power of this film, is the imagery of it. Like the original Wizard of Oz, it has fantastic imagery, as we talked about, and iconic imagery. This has iconic imagery, but it's so radically different, because everything that is good and exciting and has a kind of, you know, tangible, magical element to it in The Wizard of Oz, in this film is rendered slightly uncanny and slightly otherworldly and unknowable. And I completely was knocked out by the design of the kind of the rock monster villains that you see throughout this. I mean, were they stop motion? Because the
claymation is beautiful,
amazing, and it completely all comes together in this really, really unsettling, uncanny feeling of, okay, this is sort of the world of Oz as we know it, but it's all been turned on its head.
Now, that's something I really appreciate about this film, is that it does feel like a version of Oz. It also has that Narnia quality that the 1939 film doesn't really have, because that is old Hollywood, that you feel like it's this big, big production. The music's larger than life. Yeah. This one, the music's very creepy, beautiful fiddle playing throughout. Beautiful
and there aren't any musical numbers.
No musical, no one's singing, but it's... No, I love this. Don't be ridiculous again. But you're right. It is iconic. The Emerald City is no longer emerald. Yeah. But there's a theme in that the Gnome King has stolen that back, because they were stolen from it. This idea of con men taking, or kind of an imperialistic.
That's what I was going to say. It's really colonialism, isn't it?
It really is. It's so dramatic. But you're right. The claymation's brilliant, and I love the final sequence. Yeah. In this one, you get riddles. Yes. Almost riddles of, you have to do something to seek out the right answer. Yeah. To seek out the truth of what the Gnome King's powers are. Yes. And it's a brilliant sequence. And some people disagree with me on this, but I love the way that the original characters look in this reinterpretation.
I totally agree.
The Scarecrow is bizarre. Yeah. But he looks like a scarecrow.
Almost as though it's been filtered through a sort of Tim Burton vision, because everything in it is just a little bit off, a little bit crooked. And it does. It's recognizably the same world. They're recognizably the same characters. But there's just a slightly sinister edge to everything. And I mean, the way that we're introduced as well, you know, to to the Tin Man, for example, as this statue frozen in time. It's very Narnia again, but it's really disturbing. I mean, this film, I think, for me, unlike The Wizard of Oz, has real stakes because you feel that this is a world that is completely doomed. It's not that the world is ending, it's that it's ended. The apocalypse has happened, evil has triumphed, and the only person who can do anything to save it, and also, to essentially sort of save herself and redeem herself after, the last film basically left her in, what everyone perceived and perhaps she herself perceived as having a mental breakdown. So I just think that this film, it works so much on both a thematic level and a creepy level, but also for me, it has an emotional arc that really works. I said it before, I don't think that we get the best Dorothy performance from Judy Garland. I think we get it in this film from the actress whose name I've immediately forgotten.
Fairuza Balk. Famous for The Craft, and she was in that terrible version of Dr. Moreau, Island of Dr. Moreau. Yeah,
that's where I've seen her. I think Fairuza Balk is the best Dorothy, and I'll put that on paper and sign it.
Now, okay, I disagree with you, but I don't disagree with you like with the same ferocity I disagreed with you in the last review.
Yes.
But I believe that she is a really good Dorothy because she is a lot younger. She's actually more accurate to the child who killed from the books. And that works really well for this film.
There's an authenticity to
Yeah,
it.
because the one thing that maybe is against this film is that all the characters that she meets are all puppets and fake. They're not real humans. You don't have that connection that, say, Judy Garland did with her three companions, because you don't have that human emotion. But what you do have is a child actress selling it so well that she is the Dorothy of Oz. She's the Dorothy of this Oz. Absolutely. She is in this slightly more warped, slightly more based on the L. Frank Baum novel versions. And I really, really appreciate that. I do think this film may be a little empty because of that. It sort of does feel very, and quite right, that's part of the story. Oz has been taken over in silence. But it therefore feels that Oz is just, it feels less fantastical because it does use a lot more real location. And I love the sort of fake Jim Henson-ness. The puppets don't have that quite, they don't dominate as much as a Jim Henson project.
No.
Like Labyrinth, the puppets are everywhere.
Yes.
Every corner you see a little puppetry happening. Whereas this is very, you have your main characters and that's about it. You do have some interesting locations. I think Emerald City is quite dull, quite purposefully,
I
but
really
small.
like that because it plays so effectively in contrast to what has come before. And I think that so much of the film feels more adult. It feels more grounded. To me, this felt like, it's a slightly more gritty, it's a slightly more grown-up version of Oz that we see. And I think that works for me because I think it's dealing with heavier themes as well.
I think you really get that. And I think Piper Laurie in the beginning is actually brilliant.
I agree.
And him. And
I feel an emotional connection. I feel an emotional connection with the world that Dorothy has to leave in a way that I don't in The Wizard of Oz.
I guess I don't agree with you, but I understand it.
Yeah.
For Arcs, it feels like it was made decades later, where the nuance of storytelling has been really developed.
Yes.
And you can sense that. And I feel there is a little bit of a disconnection from this film. I loved it when I was a kid. I still really do love it. I would say love, but smaller lowercase love than one of the likes of Labyrinth or Dark Crystal. Because I don't think it pushes it quite enough, maybe. And I think it gets weird, and I love that it gets weird. I love the fascination with, you just hear about the chicken all the way through the film. It makes very little sense until the very end, and then, MacGuffins come out of nowhere. Yeah. I don't know what I think is missing as much. It has a little bit of that. Something's a bit lost in translation a bit. Yeah. And the director never directed another film. He's more in sound engineering. Walter Murch is his name. But I'd highly recommend the film for anyone to watch who has that fascination, because I do think, though I don't think she's the best Dorothy, I believe that the performance she's definitely the second best.
Yeah.
Like, with very close in the sense of, if you want that kind of performance, this childlike wonder, this fascination with Oz, you believe this person is beloved around Oz. She's this iconic figure in the world.
Yes.
Even though she's a small pigtailed child. Yeah. She carries that weight. These films don't get made anymore because people are so concerned with, and maybe I'll discuss it in the next review, concerned with the 3-act beats of this is how it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
But I love the weird turns and the weird trips and everything. thinking, maybe I'd want a bit more weird. I think maybe that's just the way I'm inclined to do with these films.
Yeah.
I want something that's even more out of the blue. Because maybe because I've sat with this film for years.
Yes.
That I'm not coming in with fresh eyes, very aged eyes with this film. I watched it very young like you did.
Yes.
But maybe I just want something just a push extra. Don't be ashamed. Don't
Yeah.
be afraid to be returned to Oz.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I think, yeah, it's brilliant.
I think that for me, it is the exact right amount of weird and yet still retaining that kind of fairy tale structure. Because I just love the fact that it exists in this form where it is taking huge swings. And I talked about how the first film is very much kind of indebted to, I think, you know, a previous age of cinema. It's a film that is kind of harking back to sort of the 1910s, as far as I'm concerned, the original Wizard of Oz. Well, this also feels like it's harking back to a different age of cinema, but also at the same time, it's staying completely true to the kind of character of the original film in terms of it's always pushing the boundaries of what you can put on screen. It's really interested in going, okay, in the last film, you know, we had all of these fantastic landscapes and we had all of these fantastic special effects. What if in this film we take it up a notch and we go even crazier with it? And I just feel like they, you know, and it's in a weird way as well, but they've turned all of the dials up in a way that I found just really fascinating. It's such an exciting film to watch as a fan of cinema because you're going, well, they really went there with this sequel to The Wizard of Oz. Like, it's crazy, but it's brilliant. It was a real flop at the time, but I think it has been redeemed by time. And I think rightly so.
Me too. Me too. Watch it. Please watch it. To cap off this week, we finish with Oz the Great and Powerful, directed by Sam Raimi and released in 2013, starring James Franco and Mila Kunis as a young and not yet established wizard travels to Oz for the very first time. Now, Reuben, what did you think of this film?
So, I hadn't watched this until this week. So, I kind of knew that it's generally not very well regarded. It's not a beloved entry in the Wizard of Oz canon, nor is it, I don't think, you know, among one of the Sam Raimi films people ever want to talk about. So you can imagine my surprise when I started watching it. The title started rolling, these kind of eerie black and white puppet show credits, that then takes us into this really kind of intriguing, almost Nightmare Alley-esque story following Oz before he goes to the land of Oz as a kind of huckster in a traveling show. He's a, you know, kind of down on his luck stage magician. He's kind of, you know, seducing women into kind of going along with his acts so that they can make him seem like a real wizard, but he doesn't actually have any skills. And I was really surprised by how much I liked it. For the first 15 minutes of this, I was thinking, whoa, everyone's got this wrong. This is great. It is gorgeously shot in this black and white, obviously in homage to the first film in this, you know, boxy 4:3 aspect ratio. And James Franco is playing this, you know, kind of debonair, narcissistic, egotistical, but actually, you know, he's got a secret heart of gold con man who we obviously know is going to turn into this great and powerful wizard. And I was really, really enjoying it. And then we go to Oz, and the whole thing just fell apart for me. I just can't believe that the first 15 minutes, which genuinely I think are visually stunning and just like thematically very rich and brilliantly played by James Franco, who I think is a very good performer. I mean, you know, controversies correctly acknowledged. You know, I do think he's very good in this role because I think he brings the charm and the smarm in equal measure. But then we go to Oz and suddenly everything is in Technicolor, but everything is surface level, everything is hollow. And I just stopped caring about the story and I stopped caring about the characters. And it became a sort of, you know, semi-engaging plod back through, you know, along the yellow brick road. And I think it's okay. I don't think it's a bad film. I think it's okay. I think that the finale, which takes a sort of surprisingly Home Alone style bent, is actually really good fun. But honestly, I was really let down because I really think the opening 15 minutes are really promising.
I saw this film a long time ago.
Yeah.
But only once. I'd only seen it once before. And I went back and I watched the opening. I was like, actually, is this film secretly good? And
Yeah.
I think I remember liking it, but very muted like.
Yeah.
But the opening is brilliant, the way it's shot, and you're always going to get interesting camera movement with
Yeah.
Sam Raimi. He's always very kinetic. You get a brilliant title sequence, and I love the score to this film.
I was about to
That's
say the
something
Danny Elfman score is really sensational.
Really, really good. And that's why I gravitated to when I first watched it. I thought that opening titles music is beautiful. The music box music has such majestic chord changes that really make me feel like, yes, this could be a Wizard of Oz style song. It has the weighty way it's written, similar to the 39 film. However, and this is my problem with the entire film. I think it's the most miscast film in recent memory.
Wow.
I believe James Franco is terrible in this film. Absolutely terrible.
Okay.
And like, he is smarmy, and that maybe on retrospect, what we know now, it sort of has that weird gross gloss over
I
it.
agree.
But I think he is not able to commit to the sincerity. I think he's sleepwalking through the film. I think Mila Kunis is dreadfully miscast in this film. Rachel Weisz gives a better performance. Zach Braff is quite good in this film as the voice of the monkey, and like in the 39 film, you see people from the real world then reflected as versions of themselves in Oz.
Yeah.
But you're right. The beginning is so good. The filmmaking is so tailored to that early 1900s filmmaking techniques, the 1930s, really echoing almost silent film in a way.
And it has that atmosphere as well of magic. Like, I think that they do a really good job of making you think, okay, so he isn't actually magical, but he is a tremendous showman. And I think that when we see him perform, we actually get enraptured by the magic as well as the audience, and then it falls apart. No, but I think that we do get a sense of, actually, you know, as much as he is a con man, I think that there is a goodness shining through, and crucially, there is a talent shining through. So even though he's phenomenally selfish and he wants to be great and powerful, we also understand that he is very talented and has potential, and I think that helps us get on board with him, because he is otherwise thoroughly unlikable.
Oh, I think he's completely unlikable.
Right.
Absolutely. I think there's a problem with his goals. I even think at the resolution of this film, he hasn't really learned the right lesson.
Oh.
And from what we see, as this seems more like a prequel to the 39 film. It is
a prequel to the 39.
And it's very tailored towards that, the way it presents itself.
Yeah.
However, I feel like, well, he's going to become this con man wizard that we see later. So maybe it's right that he doesn't quite know his lesson, but in the end, he's just still trying to get with women, he's got what he wanted through massive deception. And yes, he's learned a lesson.
Yeah.
But I can't stand him.
Really?
I can't stand him.
Can I briefly mount a defense of that character?
Sure, go ahead.
So I actually think that the way in which that character evolves from being this tremendous narcissist to being someone who understands that actually he's doing something for the good of the people, and it happens to reward him. At the end, he actually is selfless. He does a big selfless act that actually has the effect, unexpectedly, of bringing him everything that he's ever wanted. But I did think that he learned a lesson. I loved the way that his relationship between him and the China doll girl.
That's my favorite part.
Because he becomes this father figure. She has lost her family, and he becomes her sort of surrogate father. And I just thought that was a really, really lovely portrayal of a sort of, you know, slightly dysfunctional, slightly chalk and cheese father-duo relationship that changes him for good. He is changed for good. And I did believe in that, and I did believe in his emotional arc. And because of the problems that I have with The Wizard of Oz in the 1939 film, and because of the fact that I see The Wizard of Oz in that portrayal as being a fundamentally unlikable, completely, you know, unfairly rewarded con man who swindles everyone and gets away with it, I actually like what Oz the Great and Powerful does, because it justifies why he then sets out to con everybody, because it says that actually he is necessary. Sure, what he is doing is deceptive, but he is doing it for the good of the people, and it makes sense.
See, I think actually, no, I can agree with you.
Yeah.
I don't think my problem is with the story arc of the character. I actually think it works really quite well.
Yeah.
That he does, as I said, my favorite moment in this film is what you said, the China girl sequence after the ransack. And I think it actually is real beautiful moment. Really drawn down, no crazy camera movement. It's just slow down. And Raimi does those moments really quite well. So,
And the animation of the China doll girl is
the best,
brilliant.
best
Brilliant.
CGI in the film.
She feels delicate.
She does. The rest of the CGI is a bit muddled and has that video game effect. But I still think it could have been sold better. But I still don't believe his character has any goodness. I believe he's all doing it through a wry smile. And like, there seems to be ugliness still in it.
I think that the whole film is about him fighting against his personality because he's actually good. He just thinks he's bad. And I do disagree with you. I do think they do a good job of establishing that he secretly has a good and true heart. So I think that has really aided me in kind of latching on to that storyline, because I didn't hate his character completely.
Oz feels incoherent.
Yeah, I do agree.
Just video games, Spyro, Zelda, sort of like fake grass and everything in it. It doesn't have any weight to it. It doesn't have the cinematic marvel of the 30s version. It doesn't have the bleak but very real, tangible reality of Return to Oz.
Yeah.
And this film does do something better than Wicked. Its color grade is more vibrant,
That's
saturated.
what I was going to say. It at least has the popping colors of the original.
However, I think it just looks like a bit better than Red One, but this is the progenitor towards it. This is just a wash of just, it's too much for me. It's just, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's all over the place.
Yeah. It just lacks soul, it lacks spark, it lacks magic. Yeah. And that's a real shame. For me, it's definitely the weakest in the franchise.
It's definitely not wonderful. So there was only one film that came out this week. So I guess a good way of doing it is, let's rank them.
Yeah, so I think our film of the week has to be Wicked.
Oh, it has to be. There was only one.
But if we're judging our favorite to least favorite of the Oz universe films, I think in fourth place for me is Oz the Great and Powerful.
Same. Fourth, Oz the Great and Powerful.
In third place for me, it's The Wizard of Oz.
I think I'll put Return to Oz at this moment.
Okay.
Sacrilegious, I know from
that
me,
is
but
sacrilegious.
Return to Oz is 3.
In second place, for me, it's Return to Oz.
Okay. I respect it.
And in first place for me, it's Wicked.
So therefore, that must mean that Wicked is my number 2. And of course, nothing can beat the seminal classic, The Wizard of Oz. It's just, I said it before, it's a perfect movie. You can't beat perfection.
I mean, the great thing is I think everyone is going to go out and they're going to watch Wicked, and then they're going to come back and they're going to want to revisit the original. So go to the cinema, have a great time, and then revisit, 1 and 2, because they're really interesting films. And also Great and Powerful is worth a watch as well.
Watch Return to Oz. That's one I'd recommend the most, because you are going to see Wicked because you should.
Yes.
You should. And hopefully everyone's seen The Wizard of Oz and has better opinions on it than Reuben does. Oz the Great and Powerful. Do with that whatever you want. I really don't care.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Cinema Spotlight. It has been lovely as always having you.
Next week, we'll be talking about Moana 2, Conclave, and All We Imagine Is Light. So you better tune in.
Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you. See you next week.
See you next week.